Hi. Well, I saw the Phil McGraw interview of Donald Trump. Phil McGraw is, of course, the person who was affiliated with Oprah during her court case in Texas, and he is known in the media as Dr. Phil, as a psychologist. He is not a medical doctor in any way. What he does is court analyses. He does um, helps people pick juries for their cases. This interview was clearly biased. Dr. Phil is a friend of Trump's. He's visited Mar-a-Lago many times for social events. He, I'm sure, has donated many times to um, his campaigns, and so he's trying to put himself as a neutral, which is, of course, a lie. The interview was very skewed to support the candidacy and eventual election of Trump. He brought out numbers and said, let's compare you and Biden. And then he had all these great numbers of how things were cheaper, gas was cheaper, taxes were cheaper, and so forth under Trump. And everything was worse under Biden. And then he says, I don't understand why people won't just vote for you because look at these numbers. But he had no explanation where the numbers came from or what period of time those numbers represented or anything. They were just numbers he threw out, and clearly he was just trying to support Trump. It was very blatant. Um, and then he went on he let Trump ramble, give his usual things. He went from everything from Hillary and lock her up to everything he wants to be known for through his campaign speeches. And then Dr. Phil said he gave some things that he was particularly interested in, and his questions were things like, well, how are the family feeling? How are you getting along with your family? What do you and your wife talk about? How are things going with Barron? Why are you running? You have everything. Why are you even in this position? So, those were very softball questions and really weren't meant to elicit anything that was important really for the campaign. So now Phil wants to talk to Biden and he wants to talk to Kennedy. The other two that are running, I would say avoid Phil at all costs. He is definitely biased. He is definitely on the Trump bandwagon. Now, Phil was a person, he met Oprah when Oprah was dragged into Texas, when Texas sued her because they claimed she was ruining the beef industry. Oprah was so powerful in those days that during one of her weight loss um, times, she proclaimed on her TV show that she was never going to eat hamburger again. The Texas people said she ruined the beef industry, and they dragged her into Texas to get compensation for money they lost from Oprah's statement that she was never going to eat hamburger again. The case was big. Oprah was scared because she was down there among all of those Republicans and racists, and people were very angry with her. They wanted her money, and they were talking big bucks. They wanted lots and lots of money from Oprah for a statement, a speech, a little something she said. Well, she was surrounded by people who said they were trying to help her. Dr. Phil was one of those people. He helped pick the jury for Oprah's trial, and he hung on like a parasite. He knew that Oprah was very grateful she won the case, and he followed her and he's been following her for the rest of her life. She was giving out TV shows at that time, and she picked about 3 or 4 people. Um, and Dr. Phil uh, was always at her side. He was always in her ear, and he got his TV show because he was always there. And Oprah was grateful that she was out of Texas. Now, on this interview that Phil did with um, Trump, he also had a panel. That panel consisted of people from Texas, people who are affiliated with Phil's jury picking group. And so they're old Texas friends. They're, I'm sure, all Republicans. I'm sure they're old Donald Trump supporters for many, many years. And then he had an audience, and some of the people, were very close to Phil. So it was not a neutral audience. These were an audience of Dr. Phil followers from his TV show, from his involvement with the Trump campaign, and so forth. And so the whole thing was extremely biased. The biases were not revealed. And then, the thing was just horrible. Then in the end, they say, well, and the questions were all staged. These questions from the audience were all staged. They say, well, what do you want in a leader? What would you pick, Phil? And Phil says, well, I'm used to working with teams. I like to work with a team. And Oprah always said I was a great team leader, and that she would do anything I said because I'm such a great team leader. And then one of the people from his special audience said, well, maybe you should run for president, Phil. And then Phil gave a little smile and said, you couldn't give me that job. Well, I bet we could. I bet we could give Phil that job. And so it leads me to what I know about Phil. He is always looking to help himself. Now, when Phil had the Dr. Phil show, he was always trying to get his family involved because that's where the money was. So he got his wife involved. She somehow, although I don't think she had any background at that time in helping people, but she got involved in the show as an expert. Then he brought his sons into the show, and they had no background in anything related to psychology, but he wanted to get them on the money train. Then his sons started dating Playboy models, and at least one of his sons did marry a Playboy model, which Phil was very happy to get into the family. And its kids have been writing books and stuff. I don't know why people would want their books, but Phil promoted them heavily. And I think what Dr. Phil sees now is an opportunity to get in on Trump. A lot of Trump's past advisors are in jail or have said they don't want anything else to do with Trump as a president, and they are not going to be available for a new term. Dr. Phil sees an opening for himself and his family. I think Phil wants to be like an advisor to Congress or to the United States. He wants a bigger position, and I think he would also like to run for the Senate. Dr. Phil saw that Dr. Oz, the other person who was a parasite on Oprah and got a TV show when Oprah was handing out TV shows, he ran recently for the Senate. He did lose, but I think Phil saw, hey, if Oz is going to possibly become a U.S. Senator, I think Phil said he wants that same job, and so I think he's building himself up again, trying to get public notoriety so that he can find a state that will allow him to run to be their Senate representative in Congress, or he might even have bigger wants. Now, Phil always wants to help his kids, so I think Phil also wants to get his kids into various government jobs that Donald Trump will be handing out once he becomes president. Now, if Donald Trump likes Phil, of course, he will make the Congress um, support Phil. He will make one of the states put Phil up for a candidate for Congress, and he will give a lot of money. Now, all the money that the Republicans get goes through Donald Trump. He has his sister-in-law. He put her in as head of the Republican Party, so she's out begging for money. Trump is out begging for money. He recently had his birthday party, and the only way you could attend is if you gave a generous donation. So all the money goes through Trump and his family, and then he doles it out to people he wants. So if you're getting good with Trump, Trump will give you many millions of dollars to run as a candidate in whatever area is available, and then you can get into Congress and you can do whatever you need to do to support Trump in Congress. Now, Trump did this for his doctor at Walter Reed. Trump had this doctor who was always making these crazy statements. Trump was totally healthy. He'll live forever. He has no mental problems, blah, blah, blah. And they weren't statements that would normally come from a doctor. So these were clearly paid for, tit for tat statements of somebody who had become infatuated with Trump and his power. And lo and behold, what happened to that doctor at Walter Reed? He became a senator. He is now in the Senate of Congress. He has left his medical practice. So, again, I did this video about the Dr. Phil Trump interview. It is bogus. It is biased. It is just an advertisement for Trump. Phil is looking to profit for himself and his family, his sons, his daughter-in-law, his grandkids, anything he can get involved in to help himself. The interview was totally biased, and now Phil is trying to hold himself out as a neutral, which he is not, and wants to snare Biden and Kennedy into an interview with him. And I'm sure he will trash both. Now, Phil says he already has a date to interview Kennedy. It will be interesting to see how Kennedy does. Now, Kennedy is not a real candidate because he doesn't have a chance to win. He doesn't have enough backing. But Phil can try to sway people to vote for Kennedy instead of Biden. And that is probably Phil's goal in interviewing Kennedy as a presidential candidate. All of this is rigged. All of this is very sneaky, and it is a way of supporting Trump and bringing negativity to the other candidates. So that was my first impression of the Dr. Phil interview. I think it is, more deception, more fraud. I was very, very disappointed in the whole thing. So, anyway, like and subscribe. I will probably talk more about that interview. There was so much in it that was falsely represented, and based on Dr. Phil's character, he is not what he seems. He and Dr. Oz are very, very, deceitful people, in my opinion. But what do you think? like and subscribe. Bye.